डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Dear students, I, Dr. Shivang Patel, Associate Professor from School of Computer Science, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, welcome you all from the Chaitanya studio of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. In the lecture series of Python programming, in the previous session, we have started object-oriented concepts in Python programming language. As we have already know and we have already discussed in our previous session, whatever the concepts of object-oriented programming that can be implemented in Python programming also. We have also discussed that Python programming that supports both procedural as well as object-oriented approach. In procedure-oriented approach, till now whatever the programs that we have done, all the programs, whatever the line of code that can be executed in sequence, or maybe in some way, say for example using some conditions, in that case some another statement that will be executed. But here in object oriented, suppose you want to implement the real life concept, real life entities into your program. In that case, it is possible with the help of these object oriented concepts. So there are some limitations in a procedural oriented and there are some advantages in object oriented. As we have already discussed, Python supports both procedural as well as object oriented. In some of the cases where it is not required to create classes and object, or it is not required to implement the concept of classes and object, in those cases we can use procedural approach also in the Python. In that case, the code size that is minimum as well as the execution is faster. And suppose you are requiring some complex code, if your line of code that will be increased, if you want to implement whatever the real-time entities or real-life applications with your programming concept, in that case you can use object-oriented concepts also in Python programming. So in the last session, we have discussed already what is object, what is class, how to create class, how to create objects, and different properties of object-oriented that can be supported in Python programming. Now in today's session, we will continue with some of the demonstrations, some of the practicals, so you can get more idea how to create class, how to create objects, right? So you can observe here on your screen. Suppose you want to create a class. We have already discussed the syntax. So suppose you are requiring to create a class, you have to write here class as a keyword. Then after you have to mention the class name. As you already aware, the programming convention, basically the first letter of the class name that should be capital. It is not the thumb rule, but it is the coding convention that you have to follow. Say for example, we are creating one class and then after that statement ends with the colon sign. Now all the classes, all the inbuilt classes as well as the user defined classes in Python that are derived from one main base class, and that base class is object. Right? So object is the class name from which all the other classes that can be derived. Now in our program here, we are creating one class that is person. Now suppose we have to create some of the variables, we have to create some of the methods. As you already aware that class is nothing but the structure that contains multiple variables and multiple methods. Whatever the objects created for that particular class, that object can able to access the variables as well as the methods. So in procedure oriented programming, suppose your variables and the functions that are scattered in whole program, while in the case of object oriented programming, all the things that are grouped together in the form of classes. So whatever the variables or whatever the methods that are combined according to the classes. So whatever the error that may be occurred in your programming, it may be, say for example, any kind of error. So debugging that can be easier in object oriented because you have to focus on only that particular class and you don't have to change any rest of the other programming, whatever you have done, right? So now this class person, we are creating one method. As you already aware in function or the method, we have already discussed the basic fundamental difference. if you are using procedural oriented approach, whatever the procedure, whatever the function you are creating, right, that is considering as the function. Suppose you want to minimize your code, in that case you can call that particular function again and again. Now suppose in object oriented programming, the same function you are creating within the class, that's why it is considering as the method. So here we are creating with the help of def, that is the keyword define. Now we have to write here some specific method name that will define particular variables inside that particular class, right? So right now you have to consider here, I am creating one method, that is init initialization method. We will go in detail while we are studying constructor in Python. Right now only consider this is one of a special kind of method, and that can be used to initialize whatever the variable. What is the meaning of initialization of variable? So whenever you are creating some of the variable within the class, whenever you are creating the object for that particular class, whatever the value for that particular objects or that variable, that will be defined here automatically when the object is created. So this special method, that is considering as the constructor, that we will see in detail, but right now consider this is the special method. Inside that we are using some parameters, right? These are the different parameters. Say for example we are considering one parameter name, second parameter say for example age, then after parenthesis is complete, and that statement, that is end with colon sign. Now self, that is the variable, that is the first parameter as an argument here in the function or the method name, that is init method. So what is self? That indicates that method is the instance method. We will see subsequently in next session different types of methods. These are the instance method, class method, right? Static methods are also there. Same way, different kinds of variables are also there. Instance variable, class variables, right? Static variables. So we will see in the detail with example. Right now you can consider this self, that is the first parameter. It must be the first parameter if you want to create the method as a instant method, right? So instance method that contains the first parameter, that is self. It is not mandatory to use the name self. You can use any of the valid variable name here, right? But stick to whatever the name here accordingly in your throughout the programming, right? But the coding convention, it is easier to identify the method, that is instance method. That's why we are considering here the first parameter as a self parameter. Then after you have to consider here self dot name. So whatever the variable that we have defined here, name and age, you have to tell Python that these variables are the instance variable. So whatever the object created that can access those variables, that's why you are mentioning with the help of self, then after dot operator, then after the variable name. Then after you will give the whatever the value. Then after self dot age, that is equal to age. Now whatever the variable values for the current instance, that will be assigned to here, these both the variable name and age. Here you can change the name, here you can change variable name any different, here you also change the variable name different, but whatever the value you want to assign to particular instance variable, that instance variable must have self as a first parameter, that is self dot name equal to name, self dot age equal to age. Now suppose you want to print both the values, or so we can create one new method for printing. Here it is initialization. Then after we are creating one more method, say for example display method. This method is responsible to print the value of variable that we have already created, name and age. Now suppose this method is the instance method also, because whenever we are creating the object, we can call this method with that particular object name. So to understand or to notify the Python this method is the instance method, the first parameter must be the self. So we are writing here self, then after colon sign. Now you can write your print statement as usual, whatever the syntax. So the name of the person, this way you can print the name. Same way if you want to print the age, now this method is defined. So now this is the structure of class. Now suppose you want to use those variable, or if you want to use that particular method, in that case you have to create the object. How you can create the object? As we have already discussed in the previous session, the syntax is you have to write a valid object name. Say for example, I am writing here p1 as my object name. What is the syntax? Then after you have to put equal to sign, and then after the class name. What is the class name? Here the class name is person. Then after whatever the parameters you want to pass. Here you observe the in this syntax initialization method contains two parameters, name and age. So here two values we are passing. Say for example, the name is Raj, the person name is Raj, and his age, say for example 20. This is our first object. Now suppose you are creating another object p2. The same way you can write here person. You can change the value here. Say for example Mohit, and the age is 30, right? Now suppose you want to call that particular method. Here observe this thing we have already discussed. This initialization method is a special method. You can say that it is the constructor. So whenever the object is created for a particular class, this method is automatically called, and whatever the variables inside that can be initialized. But suppose you want to call any other instance method, say for example here in our case display method, in that case you can call with the help of object name. So here our object name is p1, then after you want to call that method by writing simply the method name and the parenthesis, right? Same way we are calling with the another object. Now you can execute your code. It will show you the error message. Okay, here error will occur. Why? Because name and age you are directly printing these variables, right? If you want to print those variable, you are requiring the self variable. Then and then Python will understand this is the variable, instance variable, and that can be called by the object. So we can write here self dot name, and same way here self dot age. Now again you can execute your code. So this error will be removed, right? So you can observe here name of the person Raj that we have defined in the first object. Then his age 20, that is also defined as a second parameter in that particular p1 object. Then after same way for p2 object, these two values that can be displayed, right? So if you want to access, if you want to change value of a particular variable, then it can be also possible with the help of p1, whatever the object name. Right here in our p1 and p2, two object names are there. So we can write p1 dot name. Initially we have defined here Raj. You want to change here name, so you can write here the different name. Suppose you want to change the age, then it is also possible. Now suppose you want to print, so you can print using display method. Now after execution you observe that first of all whenever the object is created p1, the values are Raj and 20. Then after suppose you want to change the value, you can change with the help of object name. So we are changing here with the p1 dot name. So if you want to access variable, or if you want to access any method, that can be done with the help of dot operator, as in other programming languages you already aware, right? In Java also we are using this dot operator. So p1 dot variable name to change the value, p1 dot method name to call that particular method. So this is a simple program in which we have created one class. We have created two instance method, right? First is initialization method, that is automatically called when the object is created. Another instance method, that is display method, that is responsible to print the value of instance variable, right? So we are currently talking about the variables that is of instance variable, and another variable that is of class variable. You can see the basic difference. The instance variable that can be accessible by the object itself. For each and every object, the separate copy that will be defined for that particular object. Say for example here p1 and p2, two objects are there. So for p1, name and age, that will be defined separately. Same way for P2, name and age, that will be defined separately. That means some memory area in the heap memory that will be assigned to these both the objects. So for both these objects, these variables are separately defined, separate copy of those variables that can be defined in instance variable. In case of class variable, whatever the variables that you are using as a class variable, all the objects can access that particular variable, right? So only single copy of that variable that will be created whenever you are executing your code. That is the basic difference that we will see with the help of practical. Now we can take one another example so we can get more idea. Clearing the output of previous. Now suppose we are creating one program in which you are taking or you are assigning some of the account holder name as well as the initial amount balance in his account, and then after you are trying to deposit some amount and you are trying to withdraw some amount, and this way all the amount that will be displayed, right? So we are creating one class, say for example account, as you already aware the syntax. Then after, if you want to initialize whatever the variable, you are using the instance method. You are creating the method with the help of def, that is define keyword. Then after, the special method you are using, that is initialization method, two underscore, then after init, that is initialization, then after again two underscore. Then after, your first parameter that must be self. Why? Because Python can understand this is the instance method, that's why. Now two variables that we are defining here, say for example account holder, and another variable, say for example amount, or you can say that balance. So these two variables that we are putting here in this particular method. Now suppose you want to define those two variable. In that case you can write here account holder, again self dot balance. You want to print, then you can print here account holder name. You can write self dot, as you already aware, because you want to use that particular variable. In that case you have to use with the self. Again balance. Now we are creating another method, say for example deposit. This method is responsible to deposit in the account. Here again the first variable is self, that is instance method, that's why we are putting here the first variable self. Now suppose user enters the amount, that will be added into whatever the initial balance. So we can mention here, say for example self dot balance. Now balance will be incremented because you are depositing some amount. So balance equal to balance plus amount, whatever the previous balance. So you can use here shorthand operator, that is plus and equal to amount. Then after you can print the balance after deposit. Now another method you are using, that is for withdraw. Same way. Now here in one case, suppose user or the account holder trying to withdraw whatever the amount that is more than the balance. If the balance is not sufficient, in that case user will get some notification. So we can check with the help of condition. So if the balance, say for example, or the amount you want to withdraw that is more than balance, In that case, what happened? The message will send to the user, say for example, insufficient balance or any else. So this kind of message that will appear, and if the balance is proper, in that case simply you can change here the value of balance, because after withdrawal the balance that can be deducted, and then after you can print balance after withdrawal. Now you have to create object. Say for example, we are creating first object. So give the name account 1 holder. Now you are passing the name of account holder, because two parameters we have to find, and initially we are passing 10,000 balance. Now suppose we are depositing. So object name dot method deposit. Suppose we are adding 10,000 more. So now the balance is 20,000. Now we are withdrawing. Say for example 5,000 we are withdrawing, right? So for account holder 1, now we are executing this code. Let us see. Line number 16, deposit, okay, account 1. Why this error occur? Because we have not created or we have not mentioned the class name. What is our class name? Our class name is account. So we have to define account here first. Then after execute your code, so error will be removed. You can observe here, account holder name is Raj, balance is 10,000, that is initial balance. Then after we are executing this deposit, we are calling this deposit method. So now the balance is 20,000 because we are depositing 10,000. And then after we are withdrawing 5,000. So now after withdrawal, the balance is 15,000, right? So this way we can create object, we can create class, we can create instance method. Now we are concluding our session here. In today's session, we have discussed self variable, how to create object, how to call variable, how to change the value of variable with the help of object, how to use object to call methods. In next subsequent session, we will discuss various types of variables in detail with program, various types of methods, instance method, class method, static method with program. Till then, happy learning, happy coding. Thank you.